Hello, all. Welcome. We're just getting everyone going live here. How are you, my dear?
I'm good. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Come on.
We were just talking before we started. So, first of all, let me welcome to those of you joining us on YouTube and our Facebook pages and X and Twitch and Instagram. We have Instagram going, and then iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We're even streaming to Pinterest. I forgot about that last week. So anyway, welcome everyone.
Yes, happy Monday, happy Tuesday if you are listening to the audio version. We welcome you all. But yeah, it's kind of been a rough Monday. Rough Monday for many. Let me end up and rephrase that.
Yeah, yeah. So we were just talking before we started. Apparently, there was a major malfunction today.
Yeah, there was like a web service widespread internet outage issue. I believe they're resolved, but it definitely impacted a lot of things. So, it impacted my quote full-time day job, right?
Yeah.
Um because one of the programs that I use was down. It even impacted that. And so just the simple fact of, checking in and out and that type of thing, it's like the Amazon cloud storage outage or something. I don't know. It was Amazon, Venmo, Snapchat. Like I said, I use Brightwheel and it affected Brightwheel. There were several other services that use, I guess, this that were
Uh-huh.
impacted. But yeah, so it's fun times when we rely on technology and technology doesn't always work.
We do. In fact, speaking of technology, normally we're on Rumble, but we were having technical difficulties, so we're not on Rumble tonight. Anyway, kind of
Yeah.
funny.
Yep, something with the whole configuration keys and all of that. So, not really sure
Right.
what was going on over there. Sorry, Rumble. I'll upload the recording to you when I upload it to the audio only. So,
There you go.
it's like,
Sorry for the delay. Anyway, we've got
yeah,
an interesting topic tonight that this topic kind of originated. When did that originate? Started last week,
middle of
really,
last week.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
middle of last week, roughly.
Yeah. So tonight's podcast is called Eat Less, Move More, and why it's not that simple. So, um, I I I checked into kind of where that came from, where that, eat less, move more origin was. Um, and apparently, according to my research, it gained traction actually in the early 2000s as part of a public health campaign targeting obesity. And it echoed that calorie in versus calorie out model. And it's rooted in the thermodynamics and was popularized by figures like Dr. Oz and government guidelines. And so I went further, right? Like, why did that stick with and resonate with people? And why in 2025 are we still having that discussion with this, right? And it's catchy and it seemed really logical. It was a marketing thing. Um, but in all honesty, it just ignores the whole complexity of our humanness, right? Our biology, our physiology. The the and I have a client, right, that calories in, calories out, and
Mhm.
it assumes that your body, my body, our audience's body, that we're all going to respond the same to that calorie deficit and exercising and totally disregarding right the metabolic
Yep.
right, and hormone signaling, and of course the circadian misalignment. And so anyway, so that's kind of the start of it. So let's kind of dig in, Becky. Where do you want to start with that one?
Well, I think you kind of nailed it on the head, right? The truth is that our body isn't a calculator. So many times we end up and we use technology to try and calculate our human body, right?
Mhm.
Speaking of technology being down and the whole, power outage of earlier, anyway, uh, it's not a simple math equation, right? What goes in isn't necessarily the output, et cetera, et cetera. And you're right as far as when hormones, right? When leptin and cortisol and sex hormones and all of that come into play, but also the circadian rhythm. How we end up when we get energy isn't just from food.
Right.
And when the mitochondria are, when we always talk about like redox, right? When we end up redox before detox and that whole side of things, when the body is working efficiently, it has a whole different, communication system versus someone that maybe has some metabolic disease or has
Mhm.
insulin resistant, leptin resistant, anything that falls under that umbrella, right? Of
Mhm.
metabolic diseases, autoimmune conditions, those type of things. And so when we try to outsmart the system by cutting the calories and grinding harder, whether it's strength training or cardio or anything along those lines, we often
Mhm.
can make things worse.
Yeah.
And it really starts to end up and backfire. We may first see it initially in our hormones, we may see it in our hair falling out, we may see it emotionally, right? We
Mhm.
may end up and get cranky. We may get tired. We may get, you know, angry, moody, whatever you want to end up and say. And I get it, right? I did it too, right? We've
Me
had the
too.
conversation where
Yep.
I would get up at, 4:30, 5 o'clock, totally disrespecting,
Yep.
circadian rhythm and sleep because I would go down to my dungeon and, I would work out because I always thought that if I just ate a little bit less, and I was down there
Mhm.
and, I got a good hour workout, if not hour and a half, that I would fix my metabolism and I would lose weight and I would, et cetera, et cetera. And I finally found the opposite, right? I
Yep.
was more hungry. I was more tired. Well, then it turned into, this was even when I was like keto and carnivore, where, oh, you just need to change your macros,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And so then I would go with leaner meat because I had to end up and drive the fat metabolism. And I was even more moody, right? And blood sugars were starting to go up. And it was just really this vicious cycle in regards of frustration because again, the body isn't a calculator. It's a very adaptive system. And so the calorie and in, calorie out model just completely ignores digestion, how we absorb the food, right?
Yep.
When we talk about seasonal foods, right? We're getting a light code from the foods that we're consuming, but we're also blasting ourselves under different light. We're not getting proper sleep. We're not getting this hormonal feedback that happens at nighttime with like leptin and that whole loop, right?
Yep.
Where the melatonin ends up and it's the serotonin dopamine cycle that ends up in recycles, and it's just we also don't take into account the NEAT movement, right? The non-exercise activity,
Yep.
the thermic effects of food and how that makes a difference, right? So when we talk about this whole metabolic disease and the metabolic adaptations that are needed, right, in this whole process, when you're eating less, the body lowers the energy expenditure.
Mhm.
It slows the thyroid. And if you're not having that thyroid conversion, we've talked a lot recently also about adding carbs back in
Yep.
because there's a lot of people that have been keto and carnivore right now that are starting to add carbs back in. Well, carbs also have that ability of helping the thyroid, it has the ability of helping the metabolism and increasing the core body temperature. So, I mean, again, you can't outsmart the biology. Your hormones decide what are happening with those calories, not your willpower, not your, endurance on running on the treadmill. Sure, movement is important,
Mhm.
But, when it comes to the problem of caloric math model, there is definitely a broken missing part there. And like I said, I haven't even gone into the full, hormone breakdown of the leptin and
Right.
insulin and stuff. But
Well, let's stop for a minute and let's explain to everyone. First of all, what is leptin, right? For our audience. I mean, I know that leptin, for one, signals fullness, but let's go a little deeper with that.
so leptin docks to the hypothalamus, but it also tells you how much fuel, right? How much
Hmm.
energy you have on your body. And so when you have lack of sunlight, when you're dieting, when your brain thinks that you're starving, it's going to increase the hunger. And when you're increasing the foods that you're consuming, it's also going to end up in you have the thermic effect of food, but it's increasing and regulating the ghrelin and that side of things, and it's impacting your metabolism also. And so leptin is our satiety hormone.
Hmm.
Essentially, it's our fuel gauge. And so when we have leptin, it will start to down regulate that ghrelin. It can tell us, hey, you have fat on your, sorry for the language, you have fat on your ass, right? Or your hips and your belly that you
Hmm.
can use instead of, getting it necessarily from the foods that you're consuming. And so that is also going to regulate the stress hormone of cortisol,
Hmm.
right? Because they're all your main circadian hormones, your core hormones are leptin, insulin, and cortisol. Yes, your thyroid comes in there too, to control the metabolic rate, but your cortisol typically ends up and rises in the morning. Well, if you're going, to the gym, or you're, say, like I was getting up at 4:30 in the morning, this is creating an improper rise. It's spiking that stress hormone first thing in the morning. Anytime that stress hormone rises, blood sugar drives also.
Hmm.
So when that blood sugar is then rising, that drives your cravings. So things like overtraining, chronic stress, under eating is all going to end up and keep this high. Well, if that's high, then your insulin's going to end up and be high, right? So that ends up and controls the energy that we actually use. Insulin isn't a bad thing. We end up when we need it, and that's what a lot of people are finding is insulin isn't the bad thing, right? When they're consuming the carbs, it's like the shuttle, if you will. It's
Hmm.
shuttling, to the receptors where it needs to end up and go, so that this whole cycle is being receptive. And that process ends up, and everyone was always like, oh, it's the fast storage hormone, which, yes, is true to a point, right?
Hmm.
But if you are, I mean, it's true to a point, because if you are someone that is chronically eating high sugar, high processed foods, it is your body is going to end up and be in fast storage. It can only burn through so much energy at a point. And that's where a lot of times people that are doing this highly processed foods, doing, constant snacking, that type of thing, they're
Hmm.
constantly keeping it elevated. That's why it is called the fast storage. It's not necessarily
Right.
that insulin's the bad thing. It's just your body has too much to end up and use. And so when we talk about, the fuel of the body is, the fat and the carbs, it's a case of neither are bad. It's just you got to, increase one and lower the other, so that the whole cycle of the body knows what fuel you're using. And like I said, the thyroid hormones, the T3, T4, end up and utilize those carbs very well for quicker energy, controlling that metabolic rate, and low calorie intake. Because again, going back to the topic tonight, right? Calories in, calories out, or energy out. Low calorie intake can create that disruption, and
Yep.
it blunts that conversion. So when a lot of people will end up with, such as myself, right? We end up
Hmm.
with thyroid hormone issues. I had a Hashimoto's, right?
Right.
I ended up and I down regulated that thyroid to the point where, you know, it was cold hands, cold, I was losing my hair, and it didn't matter if I was doing keto. It didn't matter if I was doing carnivore. My thyroid numbers still weren't getting better because one, I was restricting carbs, but I was also restricting overall. But there
Mhm.
was a time when I first started carnivore that, this old Nebraska girl thought she could end up and eat, ribeyes at every meal. So I was eating a lot when I first started carnivore, but then like I said, there was these hormones that I was, trying to outsmart, outchase
Yeah.
and, mess with my macros to the point where I did high fat. you know, I was carnivore, so I did high fat, moderate protein. I did high fat, low protein. I did high protein, low fat. I was constantly trying to use it as a math equation. Not that tracking macros isn't, beneficial. It
Oh,
was
yeah.
just a case of I was trying to outsmart it and use calculators over listening to my intuition.
Right, right. And we both have ran into the same issues of restricting way too much. And, I'm still paying the price, right? I'm still digging myself out of that hole that I've gotten myself
Mhm.
in. But let's back up for a minute and let's talk about ghrelin. Now, ghrelin does trigger hunger, but again, there's a dysregulation there, right?
Mhm.
So, you want to dive into ghrelin?
So when we end up, and again, you kind of got to go back to the fact of, the whole leptin side of things too.
Mhm.
When the leptin, when your body doesn't sense that it has energy, right? The leptin ends up and drops, cortisol rises, ghrelin ends up comes in, thyroid starting to slow, that whole cycle.
Mhm.
But when you start to look at ghrelin and the hunger hormone, the diet culture got this wrong because, again, it's a case of your body and your stomach, right? You should be eating, right? I talk about
Yes,
it a lot where we should be eating
all the
breakfast
time. Yep.
first thing, within that 30 to 45 minutes in the morning, because eating, and we even have people that have their circadian a little bit disrupted of what I would intentionally end up and recommend, but they are eating before they're, going and training and that type of thing. But
Yeah.
anyway, the the hunger hormone that is produced specifically in the stomach, it communicates with the brain. So we end up when we have this gut brain, access. And again, it is communicating with that hypothalamus and it's telling you, hey, it's time to eat or it's time not to eat. And so if you're not having the leptin, the ghrelin will end up in rates.
Mhm.
And you you will start to end up and have cravings. You will start to, you know, end up, you may not be hungry, right?
Right.
It's a case where if the ghrelin goes up, not just to make you hungry, but to also keep you alert, keep you, it's not always the ghrelin, it's more the cortisol side of things. And
Right.
so a lot of times it's because you'll hear it phrased in spaces. I'm choosing my words wisely here. You'll hear it in spaces phrased that it's because you have to hunt for food. Right,
Mhm.
that it's not necessarily the willpower, but you end up and you have to hunt for food, and you should end up and be fasting in the morning because you gotta end up and get up and go hunt. Well, that's stress hormones. That's not
Right.
necessarily, the case, right? It raises before a meal to stimulate that appetite, and it's supposed to drop after eating and this whole side of things. But again, when it is raised and stress, thinks that you're going to end up and go hunting to find a bear, here you've, raised this. But this repeated aspect of calorie in, calories out, the caloric restriction automatically trains your body to increase that ghrelin production.
Mhm.
And so your brain then becomes more sensitive, if you will, to few food. I can't even talk. It's Monday. Food cues, and so things don't always end up and trigger the same, right?
Right.
Or we end up when we get mistriggers. And this is also where people will start to restrict, they undereat, they start to
Yeah.
lose muscle.
Yep.
Again, going back to that metabolic rate, right? It
Right.
starts to get lower, but then they wonder why they are gaining weight.
Yep.
So instead of learning, to listen to their body, they start to end up and the body senses this fear of scarcity. And so every time you end up and restrict or you fast, the ghrelin becomes louder and louder. And this is, why people will also then end up and gain weight
Right.
because ghrelin and circadian rhythm is off.
Right.
And it
Well,
does.
and then,
Go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say, I mean, then you throw in sleep deprivation and the stress of that, and it's just like this cycle, and that's why one of the things that we both do is we work with people in their sleep. I think that's the first thing you work with,
Hmm.
folks, is you right off the bat. It's you work with sleep,
Yep.
and because nobody is shutting down. I am sitting here in my blue blocker glasses. These are yellow lens, because well, it's dark. The sun is set already, and I'm on a computer, so I'm getting this light that would, if am not wearing these, it's going to signal to my body that it's daytime. And right now, I need my melatonin to start kicking in, right? And it that needs to rise so I can go to sleep in a couple of hours or thereabout. And so this has become a very serious non-negotiable. People don't realize this. They're on their phone, and it's the TV's on, lights are on, and it's 7:30 at night. Really, we should be teaching our body at this point, it's time to start
Mhm.
shutting down, right? It's time to, and some of our challenges that we've had, Becky, is turning off your devices or whatever it is before bed, an hour
Mhm.
or more before bed, right?
Yeah.
But there's a method to that madness.
Yep. Absolutely. And that's where, so first I'm going to end up a pause. If you've ever done a challenge with us, let us know.
Yeah.
Because I know the last challenge we did, that was one of the hardest things for several
Yes.
BNC community was that hour before bed.
Yep.
But if we look at the hormones and we look at the, body in general, right? We have these seasons, we have this, time of change, whether it's a circadian rhythm or the infradian or even just the hormone cycle. Everything kind of goes on a curve, right? Whether you look at
Mhm.
temperature, right? It can end up in raise, and then there's seasons where it comes down. Hormones, same thing, right? Bell curve. There's times of day where they end up and they peak, and then they end up and they come down. So ghrelin is also follows a daily rhythm, and it is really tied to that light exposure, meal timing, and sleep patterns. When we eat late, right? A lot of people end up and don't eat throughout the day because, oh, guess what? They've stimulated cortisol in the morning, and so they're not hungry and they fast. Well, then they end up and undereat as the day goes on.
Mhm.
And they get to the nighttime and, oh, well, I can't sleep because my tummy's growling, or, I haven't ate enough and so I'm hungry. Or, oh, well, I'm sitting now on the couch watching TV. Let me grab, snackies.
Yep.
And so this whole cycle ends up and gets disrupted where again, they're eating late, they're skipping the sunlight, they're sitting, under blue light or being exposed to blue light through, the television or doom scrolling their cell phone as they're, laying in bed or sitting on a Kindle or an iPad reading, right? I
Yep.
can't tell you how many clients that I've worked with on sleep and I'm like, "Oh, do some journaling or do some, reading before bed and sleep still isn't improving." And I'm like, "Okay, well, what let's dig into this a little deeper." "Oh, well, I was on my, iPad reading my book." No, no, no.
Yeah.
Read a book, right? Go
Yeah.
back to the days where we end up and read a book or get a notebook and,
Yep.
start journaling, pencil to paper. We have a journal, right? Purchase and print the journal off and, use it. look at your day, be honest with your day and track your day. Um, but then also they're up late at night, they're
Yep.
snacking, they don't have, that raises their cortisol and their insulin at night. So then they delay this melatonin. They don't have that proper leptin signaling. So then they're sleeping in the morning and not getting
Mhm.
morning sunlight
Yep.
and not a, proper morning meal.
Yep.
So that ends up and, shifts all the morning hormones as well. So this whole leptin ghrelin, hunger balance duo is completely off.
Right.
And when you have to look at, everything kind of intertwines, right?
Yep.
I have a good friend, Rudy, that is with Viva Rays.
Oh,
He
yeah.
always talks about the yin and the yang, and that's essentially what leptin and ghrelin are, is the yin and yang of appetite. I mean, one is prevalent and tells our brain, "Hey, you've had enough," and the other one tells your brain, "Hey, you need more." So, how those end up and work together when it comes to hunger and energy is very off. But a lot of people aren't digging into the leptin side of things. I mean,
Nope.
it's becoming a little bit more, talked about in spaces, but it was
Right.
always calories. Everything was always about calories, which,
Yeah.
okay, they're important, but
Well, most doctors, right, don't even run when you get your lab work. What is your leptin? And it's like people are like, "What? What is that?" I mean, nobody knows what even leptin is about. And if you think of your body in a 24-hour cycle, right? That look at the clock, 24 hours, right? Um you have to get sleep in there. You've got to get your hormones to release, and you got to digest, and there are things that's got to happen within that 24 hours. And then if you're not if you're eating too late at night, right, you're disrupting that. You're impairing that glucose tolerance and the fat metabolism, and studies show that syncing meals within daylight hours improves the insulin sensitivity. That is something, again, you and I both are like very, very I don't
meticulous
want
about the fact of,
meticulous. I didn't want to say militant because we're not. Because I mean, we've gone out and we've been past our bedtime and so forth or whatever. But we eat within the daylight hours, right? It's yeah. I ate. I was eating at a quarter till 5 tonight. It was still daylight out,
Mhm.
so I'm done eating. I've had my food. I had enough food, so I don't feel snacky. Number one, important to know, right? But with that 24 hours, right? With that insulin sensitivity, you've got inflammation happening, right? And it's like the people like, why can't I lose weight, and why can't I sleep, and why.
Well, because a lot of people aren't realizing that their body runs on sunlight.
Yep,
Right.
yep,
They end up and they just think about food. And I get it. We've all been in the case where, you know, we've heard the phrase abs are made in the kitchen, right? Oh,
yep,
okay, I get it. Whatever. But anyway, a lot of people aren't putting enough emphasis that food is only a third of the puzzle. And
right,
so when we look at light, when we look at energy, right, hydration, grounding, that whole side
yep,
beyond just the nutrition,
yep,
that is where light sets our hormonal clock. So every cell in our body has a clock,
yep,
and those are synced to light, right? Not this artificial man-made, that we end up when we try to end up and regulate our system with, right? Get up in the morning and start flipping on a bunch of lights, but the super chiasmatic nucleus, SCN for short.
woo, big
um
words tonight, everybody.
I know. It's the one word I can, no, I'm kidding. It was always that one that I couldn't tell you how many times I actually practiced pronouncing that when I did my circadian masterclass,
Oh,
because it
yeah,
is so prevalent in there, because it's in the brain. in the brain, the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain acts as the master clock. And so it is very important to end up and know what that is and how to end up and pronounce it. But when that morning light ends up and hits our eyes, now you said, the blue blockers and the light that we're sitting in the evening, but when the morning light hits our eyes, and it makes a difference whether, we're waking up and we're having, more of a red and amber colored light before sunrise, or whether we're, going in the bathroom and we're kicking on, that LED light bulb and blasting our nervous system with this bright blue intensity of light that automatically tells the body, right, that it's 12 o'clock noon. Those LUTs are a lot different in how our body is responding. And so if you blast yourself with this higher lux of light first thing in the morning, what's that going to end up and do? Your body's going to think, oh my God, I missed my cue, and it starts running all of the hormones on this wrong schedule because it thinks it's behind. Have you ever woke up behind and, felt what that cortisol is like of, oh my gosh, you hit the floor running and you always feel 10 steps behind.
I was tense this morning, wasn't I?
Right. Yeah. But so the body constantly is on this. Now, yes, you did, to answer your question, but you also knew what to do to, quote, hijack that, right? Get that system back and control that. And you went about, the touch points, you ended up and did what you needed to do. You ate, you regulated that cortisol back to where it needed to go. But when we look at this dance, if you will, right, like I said, everything ends up and intertwines, or they have polar opposites of each other, just like North Pole, South Pole, right? Cortisol and melatonin. Morning light, again, raises this cortisol naturally.
Right.
It's not a stress signal. That is a normal wake-up hormone. So everyone that has always ended up and talked about the fact of cortisol is a bad thing, right? Hello, you got to wake up, right? Cortisol tells your body that it needs to, metabolize energy. It needs to raise the body temperature. It needs to kickstart and, start digestion. But digestion also starts in the mouth. So when this organ, circadian clock starts in the mouth. When you actually chew food, it starts this whole process. Again, that's why, like I said, someone may end up and not have, in my opinion, an optimal circadian rhythm because they're still getting up, what I would consider the wrong time, but they are starting this process. And so if you start your day in darkness, don't start it under bright artificial light. Flip that rhythm. Start it with red light. Start it with amber colored light. We both have salt lamps. It's that whole case because, again, when we're looking at cortisol and leptin, they're like polar opposites of each other. So you end up and you want cortisol to come down, melatonin. Sorry, I said leptin, cortisol and melatonin. You want cortisol to come up during the day, to come down in the evening, melatonin to come up, cortisol to be down at night. Right. You don't want to be waking up at 2-3 o'clock. That tends to end up and be cortisol. But, this also, which is where I was going, this also impacts the insulin side. Yeah. Makes you more sensitive in the morning, insulin sensitive in the morning when your body is ready to process food. As the day goes on, that insulin sensitivity drops. So that's, again,
as a type 2 diabetic, right? And this goes back years, right? But when I would wear the CGM and I would get up and my glucose, my blood sugar was at this level, and literally for hours we could watch it just march up. And I mean, it would take it clear till noon, 1 o'clock before it finally started to come back down. Well, that's a problem, right? And so one of the things to stop that was eating within that first 30 minutes upon waking. And that works. Yes, it rises a little bit more because you've ate. It's supposed to. But then, go ahead.
But that's also where, depending what you eat at that first meal, makes a difference.
Correct.
If it's protein and fats versus a standard American breakfast of, bagels and pancakes and waffles and all of that, it makes a
cereal.
difference.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. And I track that, right? I
Mhm.
mean, wait, this goes way back a number of years. And you and I'd be like, oh my goodness, okay, so I ate this and blah blah blah, let's watch. I'd watch my monitor, and sure enough, it would peak, and then it would start coming back down like it was supposed to. Had I
Mhm.
not had I not had breakfast, it kept on marching up. So that's the big thing, that even people that aren't type 2 diabetics, when they wake up and they're like, I'm just, my clients, and I'm sure you get clients like that, I'm not hungry. I'm not hungry. I don't eat till noon. What
Yep.
do you say?
Then they need to start eating a little something.
Yeah,
If the hormones aren't quite regulated yet, um,
yeah.
they need to start, even if it's just a couple hard-boiled eggs or a few sausages, um, they have to start with eating something, and it
Hmm.
has to be something that they're able to chew,
Yeah,
not, guzzling protein smoothies
yeah.
and, that type of thing. It has to end up in part of that is the enzymatic function is processed by the chewing side of things. So
Hmm.
it has to end up and be something of nutrient density, aka animal source bioavailable proteins and fats. It doesn't mean that you have to add a copious amount of butter to your meal. That's not what I
Right.
am saying. It can end up and be, just some fatty protein, or say you end up and you cook your couple eggs in, half a tablespoon of butter. It doesn't have to end up and being copious amounts to
Right.
start.
Right. And so I don't know if that helps folks, but that eat less, move more, why it's not that simple, just completely misses the mark, right?
Mhm.
It it totally ignores the bio individuality. Like, I'm different, you're different, our audience is different, But you've got to start looking at how your hormones, your sleep, your stress, your thyroid, it's all
Mitochondria.
mitochondria, right? It's all shaping that. And that was such a foreign concept to me when I first started my healing journey 4 years ago. Like, I couldn't grasp that. I couldn't, right? And Becky and I will talk. We talk all the time practically, but um, it's I always will say it's because they want the Weight Watcher effect.
Mhm.
But I see that even in what I do for a living, right? People want to be spoon fed exactly what to do, how to do it, what to eat, how much to eat. We've missed the mark, right? You're wanting the Weight Watcher points, right? And you were a Weight Watcher guru,
Mm.
right?
I
Like,
I was a lifetime member of Weight Watchers.
yeah,
Yeah, we had a local Weight Watcher meeting, and I started out just as a member, but then I, made it through the fact of being a lifetime member and ended up working for them. And yeah,
yeah.
so
Right, but that's what people are wanting. The healing process is a shift, right? We're constantly shifting. The body is so intelligent, and that's why that eat less, move more. You're going to do yourself a lot of harm. But there's the other side of it that we didn't even touch on tonight, and that's that shame-based narrative,
mhm,
right? Um, oh, you don't have the willpower,
yeah.
instead of addressing the root causes. And that is one thing that I'm very passionate about, because on Fridays, I do a Supercharge Your Mindset meeting. It is so important that we get our minds straight too. We're a whole body. We're not parts,
Yeah.
right? And of course, people fail to consider the metabolic adaptation. Um, you know the energy, and yeah, I made the mistake too of getting up at I remember. You remember that I would get up and I would hit that treadmill. And I remember one time Becky said to me, this is years and years ago. Becky says, I don't know. Should you be exercising this early? And I'm like, "Pah! This is when I'm gonna get it in." And I'm on the treadmill and I was doing the same thing she was doing. I was causing my cortisol to spike even worse, and I hadn't even ate breakfast yet. So, again, it's just things aren't that simple. Um, there Get yourself a good coach,
Mm.
right? Get yourself a good community that understands that.
Yep, absolutely. So I just realized that I had a question in regards of
Oh,
what what I meant in regards of when I said redox and in the
hmm
mitochondria. So
hmm
obviously, I'm really hoping that people end up and realize what we're talking about when it comes to the mitochondria of the
yeah,
body, the body's cellular batteries, right?
yeah.
Uh, it we're gonna end up and try to end up and explain this. So we end up and we have this whole electron transport chain, and these electrons from food, water, sunlight, all end up and turn into usable energy. It's called ATP. A lot of people have heard of ATP, but they don't end up and looked at it as far as like the smaller, right, the quantum side of things. And so when you end up and you break this down into the mitochondrial like batteries inside every cell of the body, brain, tissue, muscle, thyroid, everywhere. They have these little batteries. And when we end up when we talk about the mitochondria and how it ends up and it uses this, it's like take your phone, right? I don't think you can probably see it, but anyway, take your phone, right? You plug it in to a charger. If the outlet is weak or you have a old charger, right? You don't have the lightning fast chargers that are out right now, you're going to end up in charge very slow, right? This is happening because again, it's a sluggish charger. To put this in words of the body, it's sluggish, right? So if you're not eating optimal food or you're eating that highly processed foods, aka the breakfast of the waffles and the bagels and everything else that we end up talked about, right? Carbs aren't always equal. Um,
hmm
you're going to end up and feel sluggish. Where if you have, say, the lightning charger that is going to end up and fuel that phone properly, it's going to end up and charge that phone rapidly. It's going to extract that energy out of that charger very efficiently. And so the body is going to get that, or the phone, sorry, the phone is going to end up and get that and it charge a lot faster. Your body, when I talk about redox, it is the reduction and oxidation that happens in the body. And so our cells end up and move this process, right, through this process a lot faster. And so the body is able to produce more of that stored energy a lot more efficiently and create a better output. My phone's doing funky things over here now that I touched it.
So
But anyway,
apparently you need to plug it
um,
in.
it is plugged in. That's the problem. But
Well, it's
anyway,
not a good charger, so there we go.
actually, I think it just went off that it is fully charged.
Oh, there
But
we go.
the the redox part of it. So anytime that we are under blue light, anytime that we are um, indoors, disconnected from nature, the mitochondria stop producing this energy efficiently. That's why you'll end up and you'll see me outside, doing grounding, doing, all of this because chronic under eating can end up and do this. Overtraining can do this. There's a lot of things, right? If you ever have felt low body temperature, right? Again, going back to the thyroid and downregulating that thyroid, that is a sign that you have this low redox potential. And so, cold hands, feet, afternoon crashes, feeling wired but tired at night, feeling like you need that quick energy source, um, stiffness, soreness in the joints after
Inflammation.
workouts, yeah, brain fog and inflammation, mood swings, right? All of these aren't signs that you end up and you need more willpower, but they're
Yeah.
signs that your batteries are running low. And so these are the signs that you really need to end up and look for, because going back where you reference the type 2 diabetes, a lot of people end up with low redox, and then they end up with leptin resistance. They're leptin resistant before they are ever insulin resistant, or before they ever realize that they have a thyroid issue. And so it's all about this energy flow of the body, and fat loss isn't, everyone wants to end up again in the whole cycle of calories in, calories out. Everyone talks about it more for fat loss, and so it's not just about how little you eat, it's about how this energy is being transported through your body. And it actually come up in a coaching session the other day. Yes, if you've had surgeries, if you've had, because the fascia and the matrix of the body, right, flow these energy messengers. And so there may be times where you have to do, I know Coach Sly does a lot of rebounding. You may have to, have different massages, lymph massages, that type of thing.
Yep.
I know you have started doing, the yoga again. All of that is going to help with this energy flow and this redox side of the body. So hopefully that answered your question. I know I touched on it really quick earlier when I said the redox and the mitochondria, but that's essentially what I'm talking about, the little battery chargers of your body and how the energy flows.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good. Well, and the other piece to that too is if you think of nutrients or the ingredients, right? And the mitochondria is your stove, and the cook is the glucose and the fat and that usable energy, right? I think we're cooking on the stove. But if the stove breaks, that's mitochondrial dysfunction. And no matter how much ingredients or nutrients we put into that pan, it can't nourish you because the stove is broke, right? So you can't get that nourishment, that nutrients that you need. So I don't know if that was a cute little analogy, but kind of help people piece that together. But yeah, no, and again, how did this even start last week?
We were talking in one of the meetings is what we were doing.
Yeah.
We have the exercise meeting on Wednesdays, and we were discussing the fact of movement, and one of the community members brought it up, and we were all discussing the aspect, and then it kind of lingered into your meeting on Friday. And so
and then here we are tonight.
it turned into the topic for tonight, because we felt like it needed to, be expanded upon and discussed, because there's so much, misinformation around eat less, move more that is going on right now. And so if there's topics like that, if you are, still listening to us, or listening to us even on Tuesday, if there's topics like that you end up and you want us to talk about, you want us to kind of pick it apart, make sure you comment, make sure you are, posting. We read those comments. We read any messages that we get. So anytime there's, a topic like that you want us to dig in deeper or explain it, even from like the circadian quantum side of things.
It's about time we probably pull out your master class, Becky.
I know. We need to break that apart, especially since we're going into, fall and winter. It's definitely a time where the days are shifting and we need to focus on that.
Absolutely.
We're 2 weeks from time change.
I know, darn. I know. So just remember, metabolism isn't a math problem. Circadian rhythm shapes that metabolic response. Hormones drive the hunger, and satiety and the fat storage. So if that's what you can take away tonight, great. We did our jobs. If you want to really dive in more too, please join us in the BNC community.
Absolutely. We are there multiple times a week. We end up, and I even have a meeting this evening. So We're definitely there. We're there to support you, not just the two of us, but we have multiple coaches and community members that are non-dogmatic, that are willing to support you, and create it not from a place of restriction or, again, dogma, but more in restoring your body. And we realize that we are all individual. We're all going to end up and do it differently. So don't feel like it is just a one way, one size fits all group. We are a well-rounded, well-balanced group, male, female, any ages in between. So definitely
Right.
jump in and join us. And let me throw the banner up.
I did. I did.
Oh,
It's
you
already up
did.
there.
Good
Yep.
job.
I was on it.
You were.
So what is she talking about? What banner? Well, for those that are listening and not watching us, you can join the BNC community by going to www.bncommunity.com. And when you get there, use the code free because yes, you can join for free.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thanks for tuning in tonight. Thanks for listening. And all of you that are watching or listening to the audio version on replay and on the streaming platforms, we appreciate all of you. And we will see you next week. Have a wonderful evening and